Hello, and welcome to SCG Global Spin. Our host today is Alice Vandersheet. Alice is a partner of Van Bentum and Culin, where she heads the restructuring and insolvency practice group. She's often appointed as administrator in moratoriums and as receiver in bankruptcies, and is licensed to practice law in both the Netherlands and Germany. Additionally, she is a member of the board of directors of SCG Legal and a member of the Council of Insel Europe. Joining Alice is Charles Vernon. Charles is a partner at Vernon David, where he specializes in mergers and acquisitions, real estate transactions, and corporate finance. He has extensive experience in M&A matters and during the last several years has completed billions of dollars in such transactions in Eastern Europe. He regularly advises companies and investors on corporate best practices and the do's and don'ts of good corporate governance and behavior. Also joining us is Gunnar Johnson. Gunnar has been a partner at Johnson & Hall since 1993, where he focuses his practice on commercial and corporate law, litigation, and arbitration. In addition to his work at Johnson & Hall, he has been active with the Icelandic Bar Association in many capacities, including serving as a board member and president.
Hi, Gunnar. Hi, Chuck. How are you?
Good, thanks.
It is so good to talk to you and get to see you also. Now we're not meeting for our annual meeting in San Francisco this year, but at least we get to see each other and get to have a conversation about what's going on in your respective country. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you both on what's going on in Iceland and in Romania. So let's start with the easy question. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation that has evolved since March? And let me start with you, Gunnar. How is it in Iceland?
We're actually doing pretty good, I think, well, relatively. And, when we actually started testing people and doing everything before the first case came to Iceland, and we actually reported the cases in Austria before the Austrians knew of them. So we've done well. We've had, and there's a daily briefing by something we call the Trinity, which which is the Surgeon General and the head infectious diseases doctor in Iceland, plus a guy from the state police. And we had quite a, relatively large number of cases in the beginning, but we were able to flatten it out and open Iceland again pretty much in June. Here at the office, we split the group in two, but that stayed on for like 6 weeks, and we reopened the office, and everybody has been here since like June. Then we had a small second spike like 3 weeks ago, but that's under control now. So I think relative to the rest of the world, we're doing well. We've had 10 fatalities in Iceland, and if you take that to US proportions, that would be 10,000 in the US, but I believe the US is currently at 185,000. So all in all, we're doing well. Thank you.
Okay, so that really sounds really good in comparison also to the rest of Europe, I must say. We have way more cases in the Netherlands, and I'm really curious, Chuck, how is it in Romania?
Well, I think people today are getting a real exposure to the grand scheme in Europe. I mean, you have Gunnar in Iceland on one side, and then Romania way on the other, and we're not doing even close to as well as Gunnar in Iceland. I think that we are one of the worst hit countries in Europe. Of course, by American standards, maybe we're not so bad, but by European standards, we're quite concerned. We've, over say the last 2 weeks, we've had about 85 cases per 100,000 people. The real concern here is that over the last 2 weeks, the percentages of deaths has gone up. In other words, out of those people, 3.1% are actually per 100,000 are dying. To give you an idea of what that means, the next country down is Bulgaria at 1.6. And then after that, it goes under 1. So we are double the next country up, which is kind of concerning here. Overall, however, we've done okay considering a lot of other places. I usually compare Romania with my hometown of Orlando. So I'm always looking at the Orlando numbers to see how bad we are in Romania. Orlando, for instance, has had, about 2,800 cases per 100,000. We're at 500. So although we're one of the worst places in Europe, we are a sixth of what it's like in my hometown in Orlando. So we get a little worried in Europe about we're not doing very well. We have these problems, we're having a bit of a second spike. But overall, we're doing better than a lot of places. And I think that Romania, as considering the issues in Romania, I mean, we're one of the poorest countries in Europe. We have a healthcare infrastructure that is not very strong, to be generous about. It's not very strong. And so considering, and we have a caretaker government. So we don't have a government really. A caretaker government, the elections are in November. So considering all these different factors, I thought Romania's handled it about as well as they could, considering it. Kind of hard to blame the current government, over 20 years of no investment in the healthcare system. So we've done as well as I think we could, but we are a bit concerned of the second wave.
Yeah.
The last 2 weeks have not been very good for Romania.
It will be very interesting to see what happens in the fall elections in the US, of course, too, and we'll see what happens there. But maybe we are going back a little. Working environment, how has that been? I mean, Gunnar, you told us that you're in the office since June again. I see you, Chuck. I don't think you are in the office right now. So
actually,
how is that?
Actually, this is my office. Actually, this is the conference room. The conference room in our office.
Okay.
We did two things. First is in March, about the middle of March, March 12th, we closed the office. We then reopened the office in May, where we, like Gunnar was saying, we split the office in half. So we had half on, half off, so we could socially isolate. We had 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And then we basically reclosed again when the cases reached 1,000 a day. Yeah. So when we got to 1,000 a day, and it's been like that through the months of June, July, and August, we only reopened the office again, half on, half off, last week. So we've been sort of going back and forth. As the second wave hit, we reclosed our office. So we haven't been open for the summer.
No. Okay, and what's doing that to your clients, and how do you work from home? How are your attorneys affected? Is everybody doing well working from home, or does that give difficulties as well?
It did work reasonably well. Obviously, we and even if we've been fully open since June, we're not. We're not having we're close to the same number of meetings face to face as you used to. Well, you do some meetings face to face, much in the way we are doing this through Zoom or Microsoft Meetings or something like that. And that's probably the biggest difference in the operation of the firm, that you don't meet the clients face to face as much as you did. It depends on the lawyers how effective they are from home. Some are doing better. There's less interruption and so on. But then others are more susceptible to the distractions that you have at home. Netflix is at the touch of a button, or a soccer game or what have you. So it's, but it's, all in all, we've done well. But the biggest concern now is that is the well-being of the clients, or basically, how well are the clients going to be equipped to pay the bills going forward?
Yeah,
that's, I think, our biggest concern, because the work has not diminished. We were doing the same number of hours, and billing, billings are pretty much where they were. But there is a real concern that some of the clients, which has not been a problem for us so far, may have difficulties paying.
Yeah, well, that is something that we are, of course, afraid of too. I mean, right now in the Netherlands, we see our numbers are the same. Clients are still coming in with new cases. The bankruptcies are down actually in comparison to previous years, but that might be because the government is, well, pushing and helping and doing everything. But everybody says, okay, well, then in the end, it will result in a gulf of insolvencies in the next year. But Chuck, we didn't get to you yet. How is your firm coping with working from home?
It's really quite interesting. A couple things. One of the things we did right off the bat was we divided the firm into small teams, so that we were touching base pretty much every day or every few days with everybody in the office. However, over time, of course, we saw that people were getting a little stir crazy to put it mildly. We did try to really encourage people to do more exercise, to get out. We were encouraging people to we did a lot of things to say, hey, there are different ways to handle this, and you need to be more engaged. We've seen a little bit drop of efficiencies. I think most people would say that. But overall, I think we've handled it fairly well. Besides the usual, people really want to go on vacation. People would really like to hit the beach. But besides that, we've done okay. I mean, most people in the office have been pretty well, and we've managed to get through most of these issues. On the client side, to be honest, the vast majority of our clients are foreign investors, and so we don't really have a lot of face to face with a lot of our clients on a given day anyway. So in that way, we haven't had a super big change. We usually host a lot more social events, and we usually do a lot more marketing activities. Sort of like we throw an annual charity party, for instance, every September. We're not doing that this year, unfortunately. No. So we set up a little casino in our office. It's kind of fun. So we do various things like that, and that, of course, is we've had to put a damper on all those sort of activities. But overall, it's been okay. And I agree with you guys. We've been fairly busy now. If we can collect all that cash, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
The government has been supporting people here locally, but they didn't grant a tax waiver. They granted a tax delay, and that ends in October. So for about 6 months, people haven't had to pay certain taxes, and are all due in October. We're predicting that that's when the tire is going to meet the road here, and people are going to feel it a lot more. But overall, it's been okay to a certain extent. Romania itself lost about 10% of its GDP in the last quarter. Yeah. That's not great. We've had a drop of about 8% of consumer spending, also not great. But unemployment's only been about 5%. It's 5.4% officially, which by European standards is fantastic.
Yes.
By Romanians, it's pretty high for us, but we've been able to maintain that. So overall, I think it's been okay, about as best as you could expect in this crazy time.
Yeah. Did you also see in our legal profession? Of course, the courts are also an important part of our jobs, and I would be really interested to hear what's going on in your country. We are having a Skype court hearings and Zoom court hearings, something that was not thought about. Nobody thought about until right now, I think. And so the courts are innovating in my country. Is that something that is happening in Iceland and in Romania too? Gunnar, can you tell us about what are the Icelandic courts doing?
The courts stay open, and hearings are taking place much the way they used to. But you used to have these interim sessions where you're just producing documents and stuff like that, and they cut down on that. That you can't just somehow send to them. You don't have to actually appear for presentation of documents and so on. But the actual hearing, when you argue the case, that's still taking place, and there hasn't been a delay in that. So that's good. But they don't let, for instance, there was a very public case taking place yesterday, and the courtroom would have been filled with journalists, but they could only fit like 4 or 6 of them in because you have the social distancing.
Yeah,
and nobody wears masks in Iceland, pretty much. So we don't use masks, neither in court nor anywhere else.
No, I think I get that. For us too, it is the courtrooms are often not large enough to allow a lot of people. So if you have meetings or hearings, there only very few people are taking part. Charles, how is that in Romania?
Well, typical of sort of, I think, my Mediterranean colleagues, like we are, courts close in August. So everybody takes off vacation in August. So the whole court system closes in August. So in that aspect, it wasn't as big a deal in the last month or so. But we have live hearings now. The courts are back, okay, and we're back to normal. We do wish that the courts were a little more sanitized, and I know my lawyers complain often that people aren't very disciplined with wearing masks. So we do try to push that a little bit more. But we're pretty much having the same hearings in the same places with an attempt at some sort of discipline for mass.
Well, in the sense that is okay, because we want our courts to work properly. So if there's no backlog and everything is working as usual, that might help our clients as well. I mean, if you have a large backlog, that would be not good for everybody. Something that I would like to speak about, there is, of course, the economic outlook. If you look at you told us a little bit about the unemployment and also about what is expected. I think if you look at the numbers up until now, everything is quite negative and in the red. And what are the expectations for the coming months? Of course, if you're talking about second wave, that might be even worse. But what are you telling your clients when it comes to the economic climate?
Well, the Icelandic economy is based on three pillars. It's fishing, which has been, through the ages. It's power production, or we have high. We produce power, and we have the intensive industries come to Iceland to buy that power. And then we had tourism, which was a pretty new thing, only coming about basically over the last 10 or 15 years, or since the financial crisis. And that actually had grown to be, as big or not, or even bigger than the other two. And obviously that pretty much just evaporated with, there are no flights. So tourism disappeared. So the numbers that Chuck used earlier, described how the GDP has gone down and so on, they're pretty similar here in Iceland. I think it's like 8.8% or 9% predicted to go down. But fortunately, our government, or the government, was in a good shape. So it has been able to spend quite a bit in order to get us through this. And the main objective has been just to keep people employed. So they've been helping the industries that wanted to or needed to lay people off. And actually, consumer spending is higher now than it had been, because we used to spend a lot. We traveled a lot, and we used to spend a whole lot of money abroad. Nobody, I haven't bought clothes in Iceland, in 25 years. I buy them abroad. But now you don't have an option, so you have to buy them here. So, obviously we feel the bite of the tourism going away, but we think that, we're hoping that it's going to start reappearing, hopefully, next spring, and so we're going to come out of this, pretty much okay, I think. But it's, obviously it's going to affect us.
Yeah. We all want a V recovery, a steep decline and then a steep uprise again. Yeah. But well, let's hope it will be like that. And in Romania?
Romania is a fairly large country. I mean, we're the second largest country in Eastern Europe, behind Poland. The economy is pretty diverse in a lot of ways, but not necessarily super strong in some aspects. I mean, like I said, we're kind of one of the poorer countries in Europe. The 10%, I think, is probably, that's the government official number. I would suspect it's higher than that in GDP. I think that by the end of the year, there are going to be some businesses that are going to be really struggling. So in that aspect, I tell people, get ready for a bumpy ride. On the other hand, there have been some things that have been pretty positive. Besides the fact they've kept the unemployment rate fairly low, we have two things that have happened which are kind of interesting. First is that Romania is a very large migrant country. It's one of the largest migrant countries in the world. In other words, people are leaving Romania and do not come back. We've lost about 20-25% of the population in the last 20 years. Out of that, interestingly enough, 1.2, 1.3 million people came home because of the quarantine, the virus in aspects. And so, which is about 8-9% of the total population returned in the last 3 months. So that's had sort of almost a positive effect. Of course, the people that were the migrant workers, the construction people, the truck drivers, and everybody that had these professions all over Europe have come back, and they're young, working, they're doing things, and it's really kind of helped the economy. It's been sort of a positive to have people back and doing things again. The second thing is that the European Union has announced they're going to have an aid package for Europe, as you well know. And I think it's roughly about 750 billion, I think is what they've announced, something along those lines. Johannes came back from the meeting and said Romania might get up to 80 billion of it. So if we see that sort of injection of funds into Romania aimed at helping the hospital and the healthcare systems, which would be fantastic, they really need it. Infrastructure related to healthcare, schools, because school starts, by the way, here next Monday. So here we are kind of, having the second wave, and the schools haven't even started yet. And pretty much everybody agrees that the public schools are in trouble, that they are not going to be prepared for what's happening, and that people are very nervous about it here.
Yeah.
But in aspects of the European Union is supposed to send some money and help us. So that's very exciting. I think that'll also have a positive effect on the economy as a whole. Of course, that 80 billion is not coming tomorrow. It's over a course of, I think, 6 or 7 years, I think, over. There's a program for it. But it could be very helpful.
You first need to make a plan. I think each country needs to make a plan where to spend it. What a fun to do, I would think. But I think my last
come up with a plan really quick.
Yeah, my last question to both of you is, do you have a quick takeaway for your clients or for potential investors in your country? What would you say to them at this point? Maybe, Chuck, let's start with you this time.
Oh, I think Romania is going to get through this okay. I've been surprised how well they've done, considering we have our problems in the virus has hit the country harder than a lot of countries. But we're managing to get through it. And I'm pretty positive on Romania, give or take 6 or 8 months. When this comes out, Romania is going to be in good shape to have a strong bounce back. We were growing significantly before this happened. And in fact, the first 2 months of this year was so successful that the overall decline of GDP is only 4.5% on year for the first 6 months. It's 10% for the last 3 months. So if you look at it that way, we were really booming until this came along. And I suspect that those fundamentals are not going to change really as soon as we get back and get out of the virus.
Very good. And Gunnar, how's that in Iceland?
Well, I think we have basically we're pretty sound. And, we have this hopefully temporary problem with this virus causing all the tourists to stop coming, stop the tourists from coming. But once that clears away, and actually, I think it's, Iceland is going to recover faster than most because we're pretty much virus free as it is. So I think people will feel safer going to Iceland, and also because Iceland is it's relatively large, but with very few people. So social distancing and so on is not a problem. It's often it's more a problem to find somebody than to be running into people all the time. So I think we have the basics okay. Once the tourism hits or gets going again, we're gonna be at a very fast pace and grow fast when it happens. And what has also happened is that our currency has weakened a little bit. And that also helps with the tourism because then it's not as expensive as it used to be. So I think the general outlook is good, provided that that we find a vaccine in the immediate future or somehow get this virus under control in other manners. So I'm pretty optimistic. And foreign clients, I'll tell them to invest in Iceland now because it's cheaper than it used to be. Because euros or dollars buy you more because of the weakening of the currency.
Yeah, I think let's keep our fingers crossed for a vaccine and a speedy recovery from this COVID-19 crisis. But I thank you really for having this conversation with me, and I hope to see you in person quite soon. Okay.
I look forward to seeing both of you soon over a coffee or a beer at the bar. So
yes,
I do look forward to seeing everybody.
I'll take the beer. I don't drink coffee.
Very good. Okay.
And that concludes our recording. Thank you for joining us today. You can find this and many other episodes at scgglobalspin.com.